Welcome to Deep Thought. Pay attention to people's behavior in the streets. I'm gonna tell you what, ain't nothing wrong with people watching. I mean, you don't be staring at them like this, but pay attention to it. And the reason why I say that is you can always get an idea about what's going on in general. Like people might say one thing, and I'll get more into that talking in the next one. People could say one thing and they could be talking about whatever, but when you pay attention to people's behavior, how they behaving in your neighborhood, your city, in general, that gives you an idea how they're feeling. Because remember, verbal communication is at best, and I'm being very generous, 10% of communication. It's really not that high. I'm just rounding it up. That's why I say at best. But you can get an idea, whatever's in the air, whatever's in the environment, you can get an idea. Like if you are someplace and people are walking around scared and defensive and looking around, that might not be the best neighborhood. Or if you walking around someplace and people just loose and they smiling or something, that's a better neighborhood. In fact, just talking about that thing, I could always tell with a neighborhood. I just look at the people. I always knew when I was in a bad neighborhood, I was like, yeah, these people defensive around here. I always knew when it was a pretty good neighborhood, how they are. Indeed, that's part of the reason why I moved here as opposed to someplace else. I was just looking at people in the neighborhood, how they were walking around, how they were behaving, because I was paying attention. I ain't asking anybody anything. I ain't say, oh, is it great around here? No, I was paying attention to their body language. Where I was going to move at first, I paid attention to their body language, and then after a while, I was like, no, I ain't feeling it. But then when I came around here and I paid attention to body language, it's like, oh, okay. And it's pretty much what I thought it would be, because I'm always paying attention to their behavior no matter where I go, what neighborhoods I'm in, and overall. No matter if I go to different cities, when I've gone to different cities, I would pay attention. How are people walking around? How are they behaving? How are they acting? And I wouldn't so much as listen to their words, but maybe how loud they talking, how quiet they talking. Are they looking up? Are they friendly? I pay attention to all that stuff. I pay attention to all that little stuff. And whether it's on a big level or a little level, it was just like, oh, okay. Because there have been times when it might have been on a small level, might have gone in like maybe certain stores or walked around certain malls and people behaving a certain way. I was like, this ain't the place. In fact, and I've discussed this more on my business channel about like when people looking for a place to put their business, their brick and mortar. I was like, walk around the neighborhood first. If you're looking at a mall, walk around, look at how the people behaving. And that's one thing I've seen. And I always joke about having 1,000 jobs, but I've worked in some malls, done plenty of vending, and I always pay attention. Like when I'm vending, or when I don't vend as much now, but when I used to vend a lot more, I would always pay attention to the people. I would always pay attention to not what they're saying, their behavior. Like I say, people can say whatever, but their body language tells you a lot about them. The type of clothes they're wearing, everything. I could even go through certain neighborhoods and get a general idea about the type of people, how they spending their money, what they're spending their money on. I'm paying attention to it. Type of vehicles they're driving, what they might be doing. Now, I remember even where I used to live, there was a dollar store near there. And I remember the tractor had really looked me up and said, oh, there's a dollar store around there. But I'm saying, I'm thinking to myself, if you go to that dollar store right outside of it, you got some fancy cars. People with some money, they were going to that dollar store and they were especially getting some toilet tissue, right? But I was like, oh, wait a minute. These people with these fancy cars, they ain't spending that much money. And that was something I paid attention to. Like, or rich people. Like, I know some people with some money. Like, I know, I met him a few times. He's actually the husband of a good friend of mine. But if you see him without his vehicle, you wouldn't think much. You'd think, oh, he's just some regular guy. But he got one of those big fancy vehicles that him and my friend, he makes sure probably his son got a vehicle, nice vehicle too. That's what he would spend his money on, but he wouldn't spend it otherwise. But I was paying attention to that. That dude was he was more about spending money on his property. So he wouldn't have to pay, keep paying it. He'd be paying like his mortgage like 3 times what his mortgage was, just so he could pay that off. So, but I was paying attention to that. And let me just use that real quick. Pay attention if you're around some people who are making money on some rich areas, pay attention to it. Like, pay attention. In fact, this is something you could do on your own, because I always say, don't take my word for anything. Go out there and find out yourself. Go into a neighborhood is a high price neighborhood. Nice houses, maybe nicer stores. Pay attention to how they behave. Like when I was living in DC, I was living near American University, and we had some high-priced stores right up the street. We had some high-priced stores. They would behave differently, but then when I would go in other different neighborhoods, maybe a poorer neighborhood, they would behave a certain way. I remember when I dated this young lady, and she was in a poor area of DC. It's probably gentrified now, but it was poor at the time. And I remember it was a double date. So me and, for people who read my book, Nice Guys and Players, Jim, he had dropped his date off, I was dropping her off, and I was like, I remember right in front of a building, a bunch of guys, they were just cutting up, and then they just stopped. And I remember I was like, you know what, I'm gonna walk her to the door anyway. And she knew, she was like, you know what, you don't have to walk me to the door. I was like, yeah, okay. And I got in, I told him, in fact, when I got out the car, I said, get into the driver's seat. We might have to get out of here quick. But I was just reading their language. I was reading their behavior. And no, trust me. Because one of those guys, I put it like this, one of those guys saw him in court later, had been charged with a murder. So I was like, I was reading their behavior. But here's the thing, I don't care where you are, where you go. Pay attention. People could say something, but always pay attention. And then pay attention just in general, because that'll tell you what's going on in society. Like one of the things I'm going to be paying attention to, because even though they haven't used the official R word, recession word, I'm paying attention to how people moving around, how they friendly to each other, how they talking. I'm paying attention to all those things because that can make a big difference, all right? And it's part of thinking. You think, why? What this got to do with deep thought? Because you're thinking about it. It's like, oh, this person doing that. You got to think about it. Because remember what I said earlier, verbal communication is at best 10%. At best 10% of communication. Most communication is in body language. Pay attention, because people still even if they don't say a word to you, they still communicating something. How they walk, how they move, how they look around. Because like in a poor area, people gonna keep their head on the swivel because they need to. But in a richer area where they don't have to worry about as much trouble, oh, they'll be looser. They ain't paying attention to everything. So pay attention to all those little things, all right? Keep your head on the swivel. Just look and think, okay? So anyway, that's all I have for today. Think on this, of course, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.